this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. New format this week for the podcast, trying something a little different. We're going to kick things off with the NFL. With the 2019 season right around the corner, there are still two major players that are holding out for new contracts. Running backs Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys and Melvin Gordon of the Los Angeles Chargers, both currently holding out. Cowboys, by the way, plus 2,200 odds to win the Super Bowl this year. Chargers plus 1,400. Rick, do you think either of these guys will end up missing regular season action?
You know, I do think the chance, at least for them. The Gordon saga, we'll call it saga, his drama going on down in SoCal, it sounds like he could hold out into the season. He's on his fifth year option for his final deal. He wants a new contract. He wants to be paid like the top running backs in the NFL, Gurley, Johnson and them, and Le'Veon Bell. Problem is this, he's been injury prone. He misses games every season for the first 4 years of his career. And the running back position as a whole has been devalued for years. Now it's like organizations look at the running back position and think, well, we can get someone in the middle round, second round, third round, free agent. We can have a running back by committee, and we don't have to spend all this money unless you find like an elite running back, like a Todd Gurley, someone of that nature. Then it's like, well, you got a franchise piece here, makes your offense even better. Does Gordon really make that offense, let's just say like Gurley made the Rams or Bell made the Steelers? I don't know if he does or doesn't. I'm still on the fence on that one. At times, he helps that offense a lot. But they have depth behind him. They have capable running backs behind him. He doesn't have leverage here. And I think because he doesn't have leverage and because he really believes that he deserves more, out of the two, I think he is the one that could end up missing time when the regular season starts.
I totally agree. Sorry. I think, Melvin Gordon, he's not as valuable to the Chargers as Zeke is to the Cowboys. Behind Ezekiel Elliott, the Cowboys basically have nothing. The Chargers have Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson behind them. We saw Gordon got hurt last year. Those guys stepped up and played really well. Melvin Gordon only had like 300 more rushing yards than Eckler did all season long. So, it's not like they don't have proven – not that they're stars or anything, but like Rick was saying, it's kind of a devalued position. You can get by if you have capable running backs. You don't need a star back there. It's kind of different for the Cowboys because Zeke is their offense. Dak Prescott's fine, but if Zeke's not around, that offense just isn't working. So, his backups are guys named Tony Pollard and Mike Weber. Raise your hand if you've heard of either of them. Exactly. So, I think if one of them does extend into the season, I think it's more likely to be Gordon. We saw a couple of years ago Joey Bosa. He had a long holdout into training camp, finally signed right before the season. Still wound up missing time, I think. But the Cowboys had a similar deal with Dez Bryant. He wound up getting paid. He didn't hold out into the season. I think Jerry Jones will pay up for Zeke, and I think Melvin Gordon's more likely to miss time.
I agree with you guys. And the thing is with this too, is I think it's worth mentioning is that when you're a running back in the NFL, because the position's been a bit devalued in the last 10 years when you compare it to when you had Tomlinson and Priest Holmes and kind of that era about 10, 15 years ago. But when you're looking at the running back position, because it's so devalued and because it is a position that takes such a physical toll, and you have typically a really short career when you're actually a starting running back and not just maybe a 1B or a backup. I think you run into a lot of these types of situations. We saw one last year in Pittsburgh with Le'Veon Bell. But it's, I understand where a guy like Gordon's coming from, where he could play. And as Rick said, he's got the injury issues. If he gets hurt, he may never get paid. This is kind of his opportunity. The only, the only thing that he can do to change his future earnings is to say, well, I'm not playing without a new contract. So if you want me, pay me now because I'm worth it now. And I may not be worth it if I play 16 weeks and get hurt, or if I play 10 weeks and end up getting hurt. But it could have, the Cowboys, I think, are going to end up signing him because, the track record is there too for them to not have this impact the regular season. The Chargers are plus 1,400 odds to win the Super Bowl this year. They're one of the more favored teams in the AFC. How much of an impact would this actually have? Because, Taylor, you brought up the stats, or I think it was you that brought up the stats of his backup running backs. What kind of an impact would this have, if any, if he misses week one and we're doing this every week?
I don't think he matters nearly as much as Zeke. It's just, it's their offense. It's the depth they have behind him. Their division, you got the Chiefs, which is obviously another Super Bowl contender, but the Raiders, certainly not. The Broncos, certainly not. So, even without Gordon, I think they should be fine. The AFC is not super deep. At this point, we don't think it's super deep. I'd be surprised if his absence really meant that much. He still averaged 5 yards a carry, but he's kind of more of a goal line type. He scored a bunch of touchdowns and stuff, but he's not the most explosive back in the world. Eckler and Jackson, I do think have more explosiveness behind them. That is definitely not a word.
It should
be. Yeah, maybe it is now. Let's get the dictionary on that. I don't think that would affect them very much at all. I think the Cowboys obviously would be affected quite a bit. Zeke has rushed for 1,400 or more yards in both seasons in which he's played at least 15 games. He's arguably the best player at his position in the game right now. Their offense is built around him. So if they are not with him, we saw a couple of years ago, they missed him for 6 games and they were terrible without him. So, that's why I think they're going to pay Zeke. Jerry Jones is Jerry Jones. I think Gordon's more likely to miss time. I didn't think actually until Le'Veon Bell actually did it, any player would actually sit out an entire season. Now that that's happened, he's kind of paved the way for that to actually happen. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to see if Gordon winds up getting his trade request, and if so, who actually trades for him. I can't imagine a fifth-year running back on a potentially expiring deal has that much value on the trade market, but we'll see. I just don't think it affects the Chargers that much, so I don't think they're going to be rushing to the table to negotiate.
I like the pun. Rick, my question for you is, since we're in agreement – yeah, it was well done, unintentional or not. But Rick, my question for you, since we're all in agreement that the Cowboys are going to get this done, obviously that would impact a lot of teams in the NFC if Zeke missed a considerable amount of time because it changes the dynamic of the NFC East. If Gordon sits out and misses any significant time or can't get into his mode until 8 weeks into the season because he's missed some time, is there a team in particular that you think benefits the most from a situation like that? Is it just the Chiefs because they're the other team and suddenly they might be able to win 13 games in this, because of that division?
With the Chargers, they have I don't even know if you want to call it a stigma or a reputation of starting off slow and then picking up as the season goes on. They've done it for like the last decade. Every time they make a run to the playoffs, it's always in the second half of the season. So they start off 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, 1-5, something ridiculous like that. And then they win like 6, 7, 8 in a row. And before you know it, they're in the wild card hunt. It'll happen again this year with the Chargers. They have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. That defense is going to be ferocious. The offense will be explosive, although they lost Williams. He went to the Raiders. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see who steps up as their number 3 receiver. Maybe Benjamin will get more looks. A healthy Keenan Allen's going to be great. Tight end position, Hunter was hurt last year. If he's healthy and back and 100%, he's going to open up that offense more. Rivers loves to throw the ball. Eckler's a better catching back out of the backfield, in my opinion, than Gordon is. Gordon might have more top flight speed, but Eckler is the more shifty back. I think he's better in open space in terms of catching the ball, running routes, and I think that fits better with the Chargers offense. Jackson can grind it, between the tackles, up the middle and stuff. So when it comes to the Chargers, every single season, like the only teams that will affect are the other teams fighting for wild cards. So you're talking about teams like Buffalo. You're talking about teams.
What?
Yeah, they'll fight for a wild card. They made the playoffs 2 years ago as a wild card.
Entirely new topic
this year.
Next week.
They improved this offseason as much as any other team. Anyhow, Buffalo, the Ravens, all the teams that are sitting right there on the fence, and you can go through each division. If the Houston or the Colts take the division, then the other one's going to be fighting for a wild card. So whatever teams are in the wild card hunt will be the ones affected by whether or not the Chargers win or not. But like I said, I don't think it's going to matter much at all. If they start off slow, they'll pick it up. But I don't think they're going to start off that slow without him because they have the depth behind him. They have the players that can keep that off going without Gordon. They've already proved it every time Gordon gets hurt. And it's Phillip Rivers' team. And until he's done, Gordon is just a sidekick. He's the Robin. I don't even know if you would call him a Robin right now. Keenan Allen's Robin. He's Batgirl. Melvin Gordon's Batgirl.
I stopped listening after Bill's in a wild card spot. I'm sure that you made some really good points, though. But I think if there's two things you can know about the Chargers, it's that they're going to be disappointing in September and disappointing in January. That's the way the Chargers have always been. It's probably the way they always will be, at least for the last 20-some-odd years. But let's go to a prop that's available for the 2019 season, available to any team in the league. Taylor just did an article on this. Which wide receiver will lead the NFL in receiving yards this season? Taylor, you made the case for Juju Smith-Schuster of the Steelers at a plus 1,000 payout. So before we get Rick's opinion on who his pick is, what led you to picking Smith-Schuster?
So he finished fourth in the league in receiving last year, I think, with Antonio Brown in that offense. Now Antonio Brown's gone. I imagine Juju will see a larger target share from Ben Roethlisberger. He still had 166 targets last season, which is up there, of course, but second most in the league, actually. But I just think you're getting good value, plus 1,000 on a guy that's shown last season it was kind of a breakout year. He's capable of putting up big numbers. Brown being gone should just open things up for him. I don't think he's going to get 200 targets, but I don't see any reason they won't force feed him like that. So Julio Jones is the favorite at plus 400. DeAndre Hopkins is plus 600. So you're getting Juju at significantly more favorable odds, I think, and there's no reason to believe he can't lead the league in receiving. The Steelers led the league in pass attempts last season. I don't know if that'll be the case again, but they've shown that they're clearly interested in throwing the ball. So I just think it's a solid value. I also like Stephon Diggs at plus 4,000 as a sleeper.
You know, when we first discussed you writing this topic, the first thing I said, or one of the first questions I said, other than teasing you about Hopkins, is I asked, what about Juju? Because I agree with you. Every point that you made about Juju is a valid point. But for the sake of our viewing audience, I'm going to pick someone else so we give them a little more balance here. And it has to be Julio Jones. Both you guys mentioned Matt Ryan as potentially leading the NFL in passing yards. Who's he going to throw the ball to? Julio Jones. Yes, Ridley will get some also. But what Ridley's going to do is make sure they're not double teaming Julio Jones, who is by far the best receiver in the NFL. Not only is he bigger than Juju and bigger than Brown, he can stretch the field. He can take it over the middle. He can win jump balls. He can throw it in the red zone. These are things that Juju, Brown, and other players, Hopkins can do it as well, but not a lot of these other receivers that are the quick, smaller receivers can do this kind of stuff. Julio can do it all. Block, catch, run every single route on the route tree. He's a dominant force. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the NFL. He just led the NFL in yardage last year, and he was up there. As long as he's healthy, he's always competing for most receptions, most touchdowns, most yards. I'm going with Julio. Me and Julio down by the schoolyard.
I think his odds are plus 400 or plus 600. He was the betting favorite to repeat. He won the yardage title last year by over 100 receiving yards. I mean, the interesting thing with Smith-Schuster, too, is Roethlisberger led the NFL in passing yards a year ago. So if Smith-Schuster just steps in and takes over some of those yards, he would be in a good spot. We did pick Matt Ryan to lead the NFL in passing yards, so Julio Jones is tough to go against. There's a reason his odds are as short as they are. Three names that I thought were interesting that we did not mention yet, and don't jump on me yet, Odell Beckham Jr. with the Browns. Not really interested at plus 1,000. I just think it's interesting that he has shorter odds than the next guy on my list, which is T.Y. Hilton of the Colts. If he's healthy, if Andrew Luck is healthy, plus 1,200, it's an interesting play. Andrew Luck is one of those guys that when we had our discussion a week ago about the best, the quarterback that would lead the league in passing yards, Luck was up in that discussion, which means Hilton would, in theory at least, be in contention. And the other one is the other quarterback who's always in discussion for yardage lead is Drew Brees. Michael Thomas is an interesting option. He's plus 1,000 also. I prefer him at plus 1,000 to a guy like OBJ, just because I think that the Browns are – you mentioned the Bills competing for a wild card spot. I think the Browns might should compete for a wild card spot with the additions they've brought in and Baker Mayfield's progression. But I'm not as on board the hype train as a lot of people who must be driving those odds down. Because if it was Beckham at plus 2,000, I'd be interested. Beckham at plus 1,000, I don't think that it's worth that kind of a flyer on it.
Not with Landry on that team. No way.
Right. And speaking of plus 2,000 odds, there's a guy who's interesting at that mark because we talked about the potential of a couple running backs holding out a moment ago. And Rick, you mentioned this player in that discussion. So Taylor, I want to get your thoughts. Could an extended Melvin Gordon absence with the Chargers improve the odds of Keenan Allen to lead the NFL in receiving yards? Because he's available at plus 2,000 odds, which, as I said, if that was what Beckham's odds were, I might consider just a little flyer in case the Browns actually, aren't the Browns. But a guy like him, he's a really good wide receiver already. He could be up there. And then if they don't have a running game to turn to, he'd have to be up there, would he not?
Yeah, he's a good value. I noted in the article, plus 2,000 just looks a little bit low. He's more of a possession type, though. He's not like a deep threat like Julio and Hopkins and some of these other guys, so it kind of limits his upside. His career high is 1,393 yards that 2 years ago. The volume's there, though. Like, if he's healthy, which is a big question mark with him, he should see upwards of 140 to 160 targets. So anytime you have that kind of volume, like I said, you're going to be in the running, and I think at plus 2,000, the odds make sense. The guy I actually said was my favorite after I screwed up the rankings in the article is T.Y. Hilton, like you said. He's the only guy to amass 1,200 yards last season with fewer than 80 catches. That kind of, efficiency speaks for itself. Luck has been fully healthy for a year now. Hilton's another injury concern himself, but if he's healthy, if Luck's healthy, there's no reason to believe he won't be up there again next season. And, slightly more favorable odds than Smith-Schuster at plus 1,200. I think that stands out quite a bit.
Time to talk hoops.
I'd like to say something real quick, Drew. I'd like to just hop in just real quick. I know you want to move on. Just real quick.
Go for it.
T.Y. Hilton's a great call as well, especially since he stretches the field and the Colts like to throw the ball. They don't necessarily always have a great, reliable running game. They've added some assistants back there to try and balance it out so Luck's not throwing the ball 50 times a game. As I mentioned, and when we discussed quarterbacks, I think Luck will be up there in terms of passing yards and NFL MVP candidate, and Hilton will benefit from that. The thing, though, with Keenan Allen is he's more of a possession receiver. He doesn't stretch the field as much. Mike Williams will stretch the field. He'll get the jump balls. If Benjamin's still there, I'm not sure if he is or isn't, he'll get stretch the field. Keenan Allen is a possession volume receiver. He gets like 100 catches. However, a lot of it's over the middle. That's why his yardage isn't up much. With that said, though, if they're going to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game, then his numbers should go up. Theoretically, you would think, as long as he's healthy. And he's had injury problems in the past as well. So Juju, Hilton, Julio, all great picks. I think they all offer value. And if bettors are looking at multiple options, those are great options to have.
I hope you enjoyed that segment from the Odds On Favorites podcast. If you did, there's plenty more where that came from. Click on the link on your screen now to be taken to the complete podcast from this week, or check out the channel to find the other individual segments. And make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel for plenty more sports and sports betting picks, tips, and how-to guides.